What is going on YouTube? This is Acid Root. So I'm going to review the third album by English rock band The Verve. Basically, this product is called Urban Hymns, and it came out in the fall of 1997. So the thing about this particular product, I don't know a super ton about The Verve as far as this pitch is going to happen. In America, they were not nearly as full-blown large as far as this pitch is going to happen. Their main particular anthem that gets the most spins, especially past like the late 90s, I would have to say is just Bittersweet Symphony. I'd have to suppose. This is kind of a concept that was a massive kind of smash hit and was kind of seen. Wikipedia apparently says that this is one of the most recent Brit-pop type singles that was around that particular culture with pitches like that. Now I don't know a ton of Brit-pop as far as that particular kind of goes, but I look after it. Apparently Radiohead with their hit album OK Computer was a big deal around that. Fold, and then this particular album is a big deal around the concept of 1997, some of those type ones. It's an interesting type fare. This definitely reminds me of Coldplay. I almost question if Coldplay got some inspiration from albums like this back in like the mid-late 90s as far as that fare kind of goes. And I look after it. Very emphatic, very looming just within the pitch. Has that same kind of elegant, just kind of overall austereness about it, I suppose, just within the tone. But it's very floaty, and I just think the concept that it's a trap to kind of fall for the atmosphere of thinking that the only real hit song on here is just Bittersweet Symphony. Now I realize that the overall kind of eclectic kind of appeal of that particular song has like its atmosphere about it, as far as thinking that probably the just kind of off the wall production, this overall kind of like this catchiness and this gleam of that particular song just makes it where another song like that is difficult to replicate. It's kind of one of those ones that just seems likely that it'd be pigeonholed to only being a one-hit wonder. But they do some similar alternative rock here to some of the projects that kind of happen, like Third Eye Blind and Tonic and some of those type folks that I have to say is kind of within the pitch. Definitely some of those type fares. There's some other ones in there like Marcy Playground, some of that typeness just really fits in. It's interesting to see that the UK and Britain was kind of doing the same sort of alternative rock that was so popular with like those dredgy kind of 4 o'clock p.m. evenings throughout like the pitch of just like after work shift that has just within the tone behind it. But it's just the concept behind it. So it didn't deliver. And it's not to say this album didn't deliver, but it's just kind of the concept as far as getting like another flash in the pan that just has like that kind of just getting another flash in the pan that just kind of has that off the wall and kind of unorthodox just kind of chemistry that particular song Bittersweet Symphony kind of had. The eclecticness of that particular one just was not common, but it's just within the tone. This sort of thing kind of happened. There was another one I reviewed, like Chumbawamba, kind of particularly had this problem as well. Some of those Brit-pop type ones just had that relative appeal of just getting like a large hit single that just had some universal typeness, and then most folks overseas just kind of got bored pretty quickly. But it's not to say that, I mean, this was a big deal. This is like probably one of the bigger selling albums of the 90s that had multiple top 10 singles in Europe as far as those pitches kind of go. It's kind of within the tone, very catchy. Kind of reminds me of like a 90s variation of something that like the Beatles would do just within the reminds me of something that the Beatles would do kind of within the 90s as far as those pitches kind of happens. Very kind of hazy, opiate like just within the tone, I'd have to say, within the fare behind it. Just hippie like just within that sort of atmosphere. Something that Woodstock, where that around more in like the 90s would have happened within that fare. Almost brings back hippies typeness within it. It's not overcastly with that, but it just kind of has a very transcendent type of appeal that I do like the tone behind. It's just atmospheric, very nice. So yeah, this album was a big deal. Like I was saying, there were 5 singles off this product, really atmospheric. The first single is Bittersweet Symphony. This is, like I was saying, the only song that really charted at all in the United States or around some relative other type places, but this is like a justifying kind of fresh air tune to kind of get here. Definitely appreciate like the Outdoor Mist type song kind of get, and it's like a hazy kind of transcended float of a song and kind of have just within tone. Just a real kind of just emphatic type song, just like the tone behind it. It really feels like something you'd listen to in like the springtime, April, May, when the trees are wet out and the leaves are growing, as far as those pitches kind of happen just within the fare behind it. Is something a little bit like maybe puddles are out, just pitches like that, just standard wet outside to some of that type fare. It's real kind of foggy type days, and just appreciate like the afternoon mist, some of that typeness is able to get. It's like the overall tone of just seeing some of these type ones. But it just has a very satisfying type feel about it. I just like the overall. I think that's part of the appeal, is just trying to get like that satisfaction. There's just something about it, like when you think of just like, it seems like a song that you'd kind of play like when a victory kind of comes out of nowhere in like the Olympics or something like that, or one of those type fairs, just to be able to get where you just realize that, and I think the concept of it being called Bittersweet Symphony is just kind of the concept of just saying, hey, this out of nowhere kind of victory, just something like that just kind of happens. But you look after it, that's just a difficult song to kind of replicate, and it's not like I was expecting to. I just think maybe the bar was set maybe a little bit too high for that sort of pitch, for them at least. I mean, at least from the public standards, as far as trying to have something that could be another. I mean, sometimes that happens, like when you get like a song by Jeremiah called like Birthday Sex or something like that. It's just kind of within the tone of trying to replicate. When it comes to having another good kind of just impact, this kind of impactful idea like that, it's just kind of a difficult one to kind of have another fielded idea like that. But it is an excellent song. This has real nice symphony type tune on there. Very catchy 90s gem, very iconic. The Drugs Don't Work is the second single. Now, like I was saying, none of these other songs charted in the United States, but I think Drugs Don't Work was at least one that hit #1 in Europe, so it's pretty good appeal for that. It's like a sifting kind of evening haze relief to kind of get here. Definitely some 90s alternative rock makeshift, I would feel like, in a good wind down and smoke one type tune. Now, I'm not sure. I was kind of halfway listening to the lyrics, but I look after it. It may just kind of be the appeal saying that maybe smoking is not supposed to work on here, just kind of the emphasis. I felt like this is a pretty good smoking song, but maybe the folks in the song were kind of like, maybe it's just not helping just within the tone behind it. But I look after just being able to say it's a definite nice one to be able to kind of just attempt to smoke, just with attempt to smoke, just to have that relative type of appeal, just some relief, and just clear your head up just within the fare of just grabbing like a frozen burrito, something like that, just some good snacks and goodies to be able to have, just to be able to have that relief and just kick back and unwind just within some of those type fares. But Lucky Man is another nice one here. It's like another dewy kind of April weather, blue collar kind of commerce. I would also say in some fares it could almost be white collar just within the pitch. I mean, it's just more ground level within the tone behind it. Just kind of commerce, just with like a nice coat, something like that. Just kind of looking. I mean, it's a European album. I feel like some of this could kind of seemingly be around in like New York and kind of more like Manhattan type places, Boston type places, just where big city commerce kind of goes. But I look after it's just the basic kind of acoustic errands kind of frolic to kind of get here, just some pondering while out and about, just within the tone behind it. Lucky Man has a little bit more of like a promptness about this particular one. It's just kind of like an in between of like Bittersweet Symphony and The Drugs Don't Work, where Drugs Don't Work is just a lot more slag of one, just kind of the unwind of this. All right, work was maybe not a bitch, but just kind of like I'm glad to be done with it. And Lucky Man is just a little bit more of like a spirited type one, but it's also got some of that relative emphasis of Bittersweet Symphony and kind of that dewy type feel of that one as well. So it's just kind of, I do feel like this album's a decent album to play in like the springtime, just within the fair. It's just not, doesn't strike me as like as much of a winter album or really as much of a summer album or even a fall, but I just look at it, it definitely reminds me of some of that just mistiness in like the springtime. But Sonnet's a nice one. This is another one, like all three of these follow-up singles, Drugs Don't Work, Lucky Man, and Sonnet, are all kind of more acoustic type ones that are just some evening slag. I do feel like Lucky Man's at least the most optimistic one, but I feel like Sonnet's at least a relatively chipper but kind of glazed acoustic kind of evening saunter to kind of get here. Just basic routine, goes great with Drugs Don't Work, like I was saying. It's just an overall good song, and I'd say just with the bear behind it. So it's just kind of a nice one. This one just really has the malaise about it, just within the tones. If you do like albums in the United States like Third Eye Blind, Tonic, some of those type folks, more folks that just like 90s type slag, Marcy Playground, some of that type opiate type haze-ness, that transcended type feel to be able to get within that tone, just really has that appeal behind it. Vintage kind of 90s alternative, I'd have to say. And then the fifth single, which didn't do super terrific, but still neat, it was still awesome that they got. The fifth single was The Rolling People. It's like a downtown kind of pub music, transcended but kind of peppy and like a Smoky Sense type tune kind of get, just within tones, like a hella hippie bop to kind of get here. So it's just kind of the concept of just like hippies, just kind of a little bit more lively. I mean, it's definitely transcended just within the tone of just kind of being like a little bit smoke ridden, and just within the concept of just really glazed and just kind of like whoa. But just within the pitch of just being able to say, you just look after just being able, it is kind of like a nice pub crawl to kind of get just as far as like stepping out and having some up tempo kind of jive just within the tone behind it. So it's just, there's not a ton of songs like this particular song. This is real nice. For the most part, this is a very sifting type project. It's very kind of amongst like the head trip of what it is. Very trippy type project within a relative sense, just within the tone of just being kind of hazed out in pitches like that within a makeshift type sense, of just a transcended type tone where it's blue collar, white collar, but also just the tone of just being real laid back and just kind of more cold and blue type personality more so than a hot and red type personality, but I do like the fair behind as far as that particular kind of goes. This is a peppy one, the Rolling People. This makes me question, but yeah, apart from like the last song you hear on this album, that's the only other song that's like the Rolling People I have to say, but unfortunately I don't recommend that last song. It was just within the pitch. So yeah, so basically, apparently this album, yeah, strange thing about this particular album is a lot of folks gave this like over like a 5 star, or basically over 4 stars out of 5. Like Rolling Stone, which they're kind of more here and there with how they score things, at least in recent times, they gave this album a 4 star. All Music gave this album a 5 star. Like Pitchfork gave it an 8.6. Rolling Stone Germany gave it a 4 star. So there's just some pitches behind that. I want to say like back in the day it had a little bit more relatively, but I think it was a little bit more kind of lower term. But back when it first came out, it was a little bit lowered in score. Not to say it was bad, but it was just kind of more 3 star, 8 out of 10 type territory. But it just has gotten a lot of appeal over time, has grown as far as those pitches can happen, which is some pretty excellent type fare. Definitely appreciate the melded type fare of this. This would have to say some excellent typeness to kind of get here. Now the thing about it is I'm not going to really give this like a 10 out of 10, 9 out of 10, but there are several songs on this project I do recommend. So out of 13 songs in this particular album, I wound up recommending 8.5, so it's a pretty damn well good pitch. I recommend all the singles, plus at least a few extra songs in here just in the fare behind it. But I look after it, we'll kind of get to some of the concepts here. So basically, the 8.5 songs I recommend on here would be Bittersweet Symphony, The Drugs Don't Work, Lucky Man, Sonnet, The Rolling People, Weeping Willow, Catching the Butterfly, Neon Wilderness, and the Almost Song of Space and Time. So this is within the pitch behind us. I'll go ahead and talk about the Almost Song Space and Time. This is basically like an acoustic kind of car stretcher, I'd have to say here. It reminds me definitely of Coldplay in like a 90s sense, it has, I suppose. Very swamp song, but has good presence about it. It's very emphatic, very similar to Bittersweet Symphony, just without the symphony on the particular song. I'd have to say just the emphasis behind it is the very strengthy type one. It just kind of has like loftiness just about it. It has a lot of good appeal. This is like a floaty type one to be able to get, but I do like the tone behind it. But it's also makeshift. It's ground level in the sense, yeah, I'm going to work and I have to clock in some of that typeness, get to working and forgetting about music for the hours while I'm at work. But it's just kind of the tone of just being able to say it's just just some good commerce kind of get just for appreciating like the makeshift just within the tone of just the in between type fare of like a standard day. But just some good kind of prenatal kind of Coldplay just within the sense of that. But maybe Coldplay, I don't remember if Coldplay was around in that. I think their first album came out in the year 2000, but I'll go ahead and recommend the rest of these songs I recommend on here, and then we'll talk about the songs I didn't recommend as much. So Weeping Willow is a nice one. It's like a peering kind of after work shift, sunset haze with song I kind of get. Reminds me of Tonic and Third Eye Blind, like I was saying. This is very grunge like this within the tone. So this is more in like a traditional sense. There's a lot of these songs on here. This is very much rooted in like 90s alternative rock as far as that fare kind of goes. Just in the pitch of just that evening slag and kind of after work shift kind of relieved is very similar to like the first 1997 Third Eye Blind album, some of that type slag, and like a lot of those kind of hazy, woozy type factors like Marcy Playground from 97 is very trendy to like 1997 slag as far as those kind of relative pitches kind of went full blown. So I'd say this has a lot of just that good catchiness, but it's just kind of more songs than often on this particular project are more makeshift than full blown step out. So I think apart from maybe Bittersweet Symphony, which is a pretty emphatic, despite the fact that this is kind of more like a makeshift kind of, despite the fact that Bittersweet Symphony is kind of more of like, despite the fact that Bittersweet Symphony is kind of more of like a makeshift kind of song and a commerce song, I feel like it can kind of be played in night venues just because of the popularity behind it, especially in the United States. And I would say that basically, Neon Wilderness is a nice one for out and about. And then I'd probably say that there's at least one other one on here, The Rolling People, that has some of that type fare. But it's just kind of, it keeps like the socialness of this project. It's a little bit more straightforward, but within the tone, it has the gems on here, but it's not packed to the gills with them. So it's just something to know just within the tone. It just has like moments for step out, but it is responsible within the tone behind it. So that's this kind of thing. But it is kind of opiate like and hippie kind of induced within the tone. So that's some excellent type fare, just like a spacey kind of far out type album just to get within 1997. Good pitch. But Neon Wilderness is a highlighted one, like I was going to say. It's like a glaring and kind of jarred after hours pub crawling of a song to kind of get here. Just some city hop and kind of hungover types, good slog to kind of get within this particular song. Definitely It's like a good enjoy to kind of have for some of that type pitch. It's like some good slog just in that fair. So it's an excellent type nest. It's really kind of a jarring type one. Just really appreciate the appeal behind it. Just a nice one for just like some of that kind of this like hella head trip type nest. Neon Wilderness is probably the song that's most garnered to Friday night, I'd have to say, apart from maybe like the insta kind of appeal of Bittersweet Symphony. But this would be a good follow-up to kind of have for like some casual typeness, for like some social type appeal. I mean, it's not really like the follow-up song if you're looking for like a 1-2 punch for Bittersweet Symphony. I'd probably say, if anything, it'd probably be either the Rolling People, but I really don't think it has like a 1-2 punch in terms of that relative tone. But Neon Wilderness is like a good song for amongst that night on like a weekend. Catching the Butterfly is a quality one as well. It's like a woozing kind of great dewy wake up type music to kind of get here. Definitely some slogged and kind of lofty makeshift for like the initial fun breakfast type music, depending upon when you wake up. Even if you wake up at 8 p.m. or something like that, 10 p.m., something of that type fare, it's just a good pitch to kind of have some of that relative type makeshift. It's a real affable type one for penthouse type music and big city type fare, just figuring out what you're going to do, and just a good smoke one as you wake up, some of that typeness to kind of get. It's just, I mean, it's another looming type one, just like Space and Time, some of that type pitch. Yeah, I'd probably say the reason why Space and Time is an almost song is just because of the pitch that I just question, like, I do enjoy this song, but it's just kind of within the pitch of me questioning the oftenness as to how much I'd listen to it. I mean, it's a nice one, but just in terms of, like, the overall excitement, it's just a very sprawling type one just within the tone. I feel like the melodies are good on there, but not as immediately catchy as some of the ones like Bittersweet Symphony and like Weeping Willow and Neon Wilderness and some of those type ones. So it's just a good song, but it's not like exuberantly so just within the pitch as far as like the return factor of how many times you have the addictiveness to listen to it. But it's a nice one. It's just an almost song. This kind of thing. But Catching the Butterfly is a nice one. Good wake up type nest. So that kind of happens to be the fair off this project. So talk about some of the songs I didn't recommend on here. Most of these are basically all four of these that I don't recommend on here are just the last half of the album. Just the last four songs you hear on here: One Day, This Time, Velvet Morning, and Come On. Come On is kind of like one that was trying to be like another one like the Rolling People, but just didn't deliver nearly as well. It was too lengthy a song. I felt like it was one of those ones that kind of fuses the song. It was over 15 minutes. The song Deep Freeze is not worth like the 4 or 5 minute silence to get to that particular song. And I felt like kind of the aspect of the delivery as to how I feel like they kind of struggled to kind of do turn up songs and just more up tempo type songs as far as those pitches kind of happen. I feel like the Rolling People at least worked, but it was just kind of something that was not quite as convincing. And Velvet Morning was just kind of a similar song to like Catching the Butterfly, but just didn't nail it nearly as well. This Time was just kind of a sluggish type one. Actually, it wasn't this time. It's One Day that's kind of a sluggish type one that just didn't have enough jump off the page type appeal about it. It was just not one that had as much, like, just felt a little bit slumped and just not as affable, I'd say. And then This Time was just kind of one that was just kind of a peppy type one, trying to have the appeal of like something like the Rolling People, or just something with a little bit of like kind of like this city hop typeness to kind of get just out and about in like a standard kind of commerce, but it just didn't really have as much attractiveness in the instrumentation, I would say. So I think that's kind of the concept about this particular album, is just the fact that as far as trying to get some of these hits, as far as trying to figure out if they're going to cross over to the United States and just trying to meld that particular style of being more international. There's just some moments on here that are strengthy, but it's just the concept. They definitely nailed like the alternative rock kind of 90s slag on here, but in terms of getting other strengths and just being able to have like some moments that are kind of like, okay, this is the nightclub song, this is a song for the ladies, this is kind of like some different type pitches of just being able to have like I feel like one moment where they extremely nailed it was Neon Wilderness. That's a great example of one. And I feel like Space and Time was a step in the right direction as far as getting some of that looming typeness for like some makeshift type fare, but yeah, it's the execution of being able to find like a 1-2 punch with Bittersweet Symphony, and then like trying to the 1-2 punch of trying to find another hit like Bittersweet Symphony, and then just being able to do something that would have kind of been like a further hit to the pitch of trying to get another 1-2 punch with Bittersweet Symphony as far as like another kind of emphatic kind of night out type one, and then just another quality hit that could have been like something, just another quality hit that could have been like something snappier just within the tone, having something more affable and not quite as like malaise about it, just would have been the tone. So just the delivery upon getting some of those up tempo songs was kind of snagged on this particular project, and then just combined with just not having like mostly kind of variety to be able to have some other moments that have more just instrumentation that could have had some gnarliness. I mean, I think they were aiming for like Brit pop and kind of like a pop rock type appeal, but the affability behind getting that snap and making it radio ready was just not as ready to go, I'd say. It was just within the tone. But I do feel like the alternative haze definitely works on here, but apart from that niche and like the Flash in the Pan and Bittersweet Symphony is just not as full blown executed or electricity wise. But there are some ones on here. There's definitely some ones. Like 8.5 out of 13 is actually pretty damn good. So I'm gonna give this particular score of this album like a 7.75 out of 10. I feel like the tone behind it is good enough. The social score, that's kind of tricky. I think I'll give the social score like a 7.25 out of 10 because it did have 5 singles. I think this is popular enough. I think probably in more European culture it happens to be. I just question in America how many popular gems would kind of be off here for Americans that are looking for more hits. Definitely, if you remember Bittersweet Symphony, I would definitely say that songs like Neon Wilderness would be an excellent type 1. The Rolling People would be an excellent type 1. I feel like possibly a few of the singles, but they're just kind of more work shift, just more personal type ones for just some unwind and heading home as far as those pitches kind of happen with. There's just not a ton of these ones on here that really have like the affable kind of spark as far as like gatherings and just kind of social bite as far as those pitches kind of happen. It's just a more suited to makeshift just within a relative kind of same sort of similarities like Third Eye Blind and Marcy Playground, some of those type folks I would say, but it just kind of labels them almost like a one-hit wonder, but it's just only because the energy, it's just mainly because the energy is just not replicated into something more affable, casual wise. I would say it was just kind of the tone. So, yeah, but yeah, I give it a 7.25 just because there are some gems on here. It's just kind of the concept of how many of these would connect. But in terms of the future, like the Verve has not put out an album since 2008, which is unfortunate. I think before that they had not dropped an album since this particular album. So they only have 4 albums. They dropped 3 in like the early mid 90s. They dropped like 3 albums in like the mid and late 90s as far as those pitches kind of happened. And they did not put out another one until 2008, and that's been the last of them since. So it's just kind of within the tone. I think this is probably their biggest album. Maybe in Europe they have some other hits. I think they do at least have that charting appeal with some of those. I might check out some of those ones in the future, but in the United States this is really like their only charting song. So it's just kind of some of those type pitches. Same thing happened with Chumbawamba. If anything, I might review some of the other ones just within the tone, but I just question like the catchiness and the overall popularity of some of those. But just to say, like Bittersweet Symphony has over 1 billion plays on Spotify, so it's a very vast and just ubiquitous song just within the pitch. But I'll just have to see if there's some more of these. But yeah, this is a relatively pretty rock solid album here.